The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Allison Kurt, president of the Northern Chapter, and really excited to have you all attend another complimentary education seminar hosted by our chapter. With the beginning of COVID at the start of this year, our board really came together to try to figure out some ways to continue to offer education so that as many of us may not be able to travel and get our MSR points, that we're able to offer some really neat and interesting education, not only to our chapter, but really opening it up to the entire Southern California section as well. I'm super excited tonight to have our education chair, Preston Combs, present his information on putting. I think that you'll really enjoy tonight's presentation. A little bio about Preston. He's currently our Northern Chapter
Putting helps his players create, develop, and own their putting. He was also recognized in 2020 on the Golf Digest Best in-State Teachers list. I am also one of Preston's students, as he's helped me this past year work on my own personal putting, and so it gives me great pleasure to be able to be participating in him watching his presentation this evening. I want to let you know that you are welcome to answer or post any questions throughout the presentation. So over on the right, you'll see that there's a question drop-down menu. Go ahead and type those in, and we'll facilitate as best as possible. And also you'll see a link for a handout. At the end of tonight's presentation, go ahead and click on that link, and at the bottom, it'll direct you to a survey link where Preston will be collecting some information about coaching and putting in golf instruction. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Preston Combs and his presentation. Preston, are you ready?
I think we're all set. Can you hear me there?
We are good to go. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, first, welcome everybody that's taken the time out of their evening to attend. Very happy to have the opportunity to share some of my experiences and information as it pertains to a part of the game that seems to be so often overlooked, and a lot of the things that we maybe take for granted with our clients on the full swinger on course, where the rules, thoughts, and philosophies seem to exist on the putting green. One theory I like to share with players is that about 99% of the time, the putter is the last club that we're going to hit for any given round of golf. And while strokes gained wise, this might be the least important part of the game, I believe there's the largest emotional attachment to the putting. The demoralizing result if you're 3 feet away from the cup and not seeing the ball go in. Players that have seen that miss enough times and start blaming that there's something wrong with their head, when for me, I like to reframe that as there's probably a reason why it's not going in. Let's take the time to build a better mechanics, better structure, and understanding of what needs to happen. And with those processes and systems in place, we can give somebody an opportunity to take a look at how and why things happened, approach their putting objectively, and as Allison mentioned in the introduction, being able to create, develop, and own their putting. And we'll touch on the coaching aspect and the philosophy behind that a bit more towards the end here. But we're going to open things up with the issues that you generally run into as professionals and coaches when you have your students. You might have them fumble around on social media, especially in light of COVID. There was tons of time at home and on the computer taking a look at, oh, if I've got to scratch the golf itch, what do I do? How do I solve some of my own problems while I'm at home? And you might see a video for, hey, I saw this moves like a pendulum for a putting stroke. You might get information like that. You might even have had students take the time to do something that I tried out probably about 6 or 8 months ago. Google fix my putting. And boy, some of the things that come up are absolutely mind-bending when you take a look at through the most popular search results. And this article here happens to be one of them. You're going to have players that click on links after they Google something, they read this article in a magazine, and they assume that all of the information there is going to be helpful. So as part of trying to shift the landscape of putting coaching over the course of my career. It's going to be changing the big red box that's in our cover photo here for this particular article that indicates, give me one thing. And ultimately, if putting was just one thing, I think all of us would be good at it. If there was one silver bullet to solve our problems, prevent us from three putting, and give us an opportunity to make more putts in that 10 to 20 foot range, I think everybody would do it. There's a lot more complexity here. Putting's tons more going on than just distance and direction. And changing that mindset might be intimidating because initially we might like simple, we might like something that's not complex and not very in-depth. When if we just had an understanding of that pathway to improvement and being able to shape what actually matters for putting, we might be able to help players enjoy the game a little bit more. And I think that starts with when you get somebody in front of you, we want to take the time to ask better questions. When I attended the World Golf Fitness Summit a few years back, Dr. Gray Cook presented, and that was one thing that he strongly emphasized while he was in front of the audience. He said, we need to ask better questions of the people that are standing in front of us. And one key phrase that stuck out for me was shoot for the heart, not the head. We want to really get to the emotional attachment and identify why does a player say, I need to take a look at my putting, and figure out with the answers that they give us by asking those better questions, what's the one area that they need to improve upon the most? How do they need to handle things a little bit differently in order to change the results of what they're seeing happen out on the green? I really like this idea right here that everybody believes they're good at putting in one way or another. And when ultimately that might not necessarily be the case, you see a lot of players jump out there and they say, it's like, yeah, no, my putting's fine, or I just need 5 minutes at the end of the session to just take a look at things and make sure it's not that bad. And again, going back to, we do things differently with the full swing compared to putting. Nobody would say, I want to work on putting for 55 minutes and take the last 5 minutes to look at the full swing. So let's change that mindset from maybe the highlighting areas that they can improve upon and give them a better pathway or direction to achieving those results. If we're going to create that pathway, for me, that starts with something that's available in my free ebook on my website, 3 Things to Know, and it introduces this idea of the putting tree. I'd be remiss if I didn't credit the general premise of this coming from my mentor, David Orr, and one of his putting partners, Phil Kenyon. They created a deterministic model and a very complex and in-depth layout of everything that happens and how pieces are connected and related. And despite its complexity, I said there's probably something here that we could derive from it in order to better solve what makes a ball go in, and being able to look at what I've coined as those putting priorities, the 3 things that actually decide whether or not a ball goes in the hole. If you ask players when they come to you what's most important to them for putting, they might talk about grip and aim and posture and a lot of things that ultimately end up just being influencers for how we do things. No 2 putts are alike, and being able to clarify for somebody that their area of focus, for example, ball roll or putter fitting, might not directly impact whether or not the ball goes in, is something worth highlighting and bringing to their attention. But if we're going to ask those tough questions of them and have them reconsider their approach to their performance, then we need to make sure that there's a given pathway that best identifies what skill set are we trying to improve. And if we're going to take the time in a lesson, it had better directly relate to one of these 3 skills. If we're going to take the time to practice, we need to start looking at, does it relate to one of these skills here? And towards the end, we'll talk about what we do with all these skills when we need to make a putt on the 18th hole of our weekend Nassau or to win a championship. So we'll dive into the putting priorities here a bit. The first thing we're going to take a look at is read. I believe I list this as the first one and the leftmost item on the tree. Most people read from left to right, and read is the first thing you do when you step on a green. I need to figure out which direction is this putt turning, how much it's turning, and being able to provide them an opportunity to say what makes a ball break, A lot of players answer gravity, and for any of the numerous golf balls sitting on the putting green in that photo, well, gravity's acting on those golf balls and they're not turning. So we need to take a little bit closer look at the physical aspect of what makes a ball break here. And unfortunately, it is not the ocean and the mountains and their geographical location. The number of players I have that come to my facility here at Twin Lakes Golf Course, then Don Parsons Golf, jump onto the short game green. I hear this and I think it's absolutely fantastic when I roll the ball across the short game green, because it is evidently pitched towards the mountains and away from the ocean, and I get to bust this myth very early on in any sort of lesson or green reading discussion. And may or may not have a good Ray Liotta impression there when I laugh at hearing that type of approach to putting. So slope is the least understood concept of green reading. I am hands down a believer that if we understand this a little bit better, we can say what's going to happen next. We can better predict when we're over a 15-foot putt what we can expect to see here. And understanding slope has a lot of subtleties and complexities that we're going to maybe shed a little bit of light on here. So first, video here. In my studio, we have a perfection platform, and gives me the ability to articulate an indoor surface here, where when we look at a 1% slope, very, very subtle break, we'll see a given amount of break, a break amount of 5 inches, let's say, versus a 2% slope with 12 inches of break. And all of a sudden, if we were to start looking at this video, maybe even share something like this with our students, we can help them identify that what they perceive as a nominal amount of break, I hear it all the time, oh, it's just a ball out or a cup out, and then show them that the actual break that they're running into on the golf course is much greater than that they have a better opportunity to make putts. Anything that's under red is naturally from the player going to be hit harder. And if we're hitting putts harder for trying to keep them online a little bit longer, create less break, we're sacrificing one of the other putting priorities, and that's that speed component. Number of players come to me as we start taking a look at some data here from the sample set from a player from up in Nevada. And he said, you know, Preston, I am really good on right to left putts. And I said, okay, let's tilt the surface. Let's collect the data with our SAM Putt Lab and SAM Ball Tracker, and let's see how you do. And he has a very, very tight dispersion, good start line, and you can see all those balls ending up close to each other should they have rolled through the cup. We turn on the simulation feature and say, if the cup wasn't in the way, are we able to create the same result again and again? And fortunately for this player, yeah, right to left, no problem. Only one thing, coach, I get on left to right, I suck. I'm not very good. And as you can see by the size of this dispersion here, this is absolute chaos. We're talking about a player that has played top tier collegiate golf, and he gets on a basic right to left putt, left to right putt from 10 feet. You can see the number of balls left short of the cup, all of the putts missed low, and nobody can seem to help him for why this happens. This player in particular had a very poor strategy for reading greens. For example, you'll see in the graphic here, the blue line, his first putt, and that's the putt that's left the shortest distance here. And he said, you know, it looks like it's about the same amount of break as the first right to left putt, but I just feel like it's going to turn a little bit more. He aims higher up the hill, and as he continues to aim higher and higher and higher, he hits the putt softer and softer, trying to create more curve than is actually there. And we have a major disconnect between the read and the speed, and consequently, we lose that direction skill set also. He doesn't have the ability to reconcile what he's initially picked as his target. His read was so bad that there's no way for him to be able to hit the ball soft hard enough on that line and get it to break towards the cup. Thus, we see all of the vast majority of these putts coming up short, everything missed to low, and really no way to handle that process. It's surprising to me that even players at the highest level might not have the best understanding of slope and this idea that maybe we should be treating putts as independent events. Forgive me for the lack of focus in the video quality here, but a few years ago, I saw Rory do something pretty interesting during the Masters. We're on the 7th hole here at Augusta. He's got a 23-foot birdie putt from above the cup. Everything looks like it's in pretty good order here when we get started. And Rory's going to hit his putt. And looks like we have a chance right about here. It's evidently low. And Rory's going to pop in from the left side of the screen. Let's take a look at that one more time here. We've got the putt coming down the hill. So far, so good. No, definitely missing low. Let me look at it. Let me take a peek at what's going on as this goes by. I saw it going right to left as it went by for a little bit. Let me hit the comebacker up the hill. Wait, it went the other direction. We've got the hand slap on the leg. We've got the look. We're going to point to the caddy here. Let's play that back again. Everybody's been there and done that at least once in their golf career. Right off the face. Not that. Oh, no, not even close. We got the look everywhere. We've all been there and done that before, but we want to understand maybe why something like that happens. We're talking about a top-ranked player in the world who has hit his birdie putt. It's missed low. He thinks he's going to be able to derive something from it going by, but right about here, something interesting happens. Take a look at the golf ball. A little dive back to the right there at the end. And maybe, just maybe, it's possible that that putt's not getting ready to do the same thing coming back up the hill. Now, granted, you can take a look at this putt, say he pulled it, he didn't hit it on line. That's subjective and probably besides the point here at this juncture. We're looking at this putt and it's got some left turn to it. He's expecting it to probably go the other direction based on what he saw as it went past the cup. If we had a good understanding of slope and maybe recognition that we should start treating putts as independent events, that we might be able to solve some problems here, especially that one where coach said, there's no good system for green reading. You just get down behind it, you scout it out from all sides, you get a lay of the land, and you're on your way. Aimpoint Express is a very easy system for players to learn. Originally developed by Mark Sweeney, it gives players the opportunity to use their feet to predict slope, one of those key components that we talked about. And if we understand that key concept of slope better and can identify or assign a value to how much a putt breaks, we're going to give our players a better opportunity to make some improvements. They're at the very least going to get the direction of the putt correct. I can't tell you how many times I've had players say, yep, played it left edge, went the other way. Been there, done that. There's no need for that. I think one of the most disappointing instances of that, and admittedly, it's going back maybe 10 plus years now. Michelle Wee played in the Casio Men's Open in Japan, and she's right around the cut line. And there's a good chance that if she pars out, she's going to make the cut in a men's event and be historic and a wonderful moment until we get to the 17th hole over a 2.5-foot par putt. She hits it left edge, it turns left, and said in the press conference after, yeah, I played it left edge and it just went the other way. Think about that for a second. A phenom, a major talent, and who would eventually be a major champion on the LPGA Tour, completely misread a 2.5-foot putt. I think we need to do a little bit better in the coaching world to give players answers so that stuff like that doesn't happen anymore. It runs rampant in our industry. It runs rampant on every putting green where players are expecting one thing and the total opposite happens. Let's at least get the direction right and understand that slope is one of our key concepts in the putting tree, and stimp might be one of those things we should give a little bit of credence to also. Perhaps in a future event, we can talk a little bit more about the speed of the surface and what that does to how a putt breaks. Let's carry on here to our second putting priority, speed, and being able to decide if we're really in control of what happens, and if so, what parameters of speed are we really in control of. One feature that I like to use in the studio, as you've heard me mention previously, Sam Putt Lab, giving me great feedback for how the putter's moving, when it's moving, how fast it's moving, and also able to use some graphs for me to verify exactly what's happening during a stroke, how often it's happening, and help send a clear message for players about speed and acceleration, two different components there that if you spend some time with me in studio, we can dive a little bit further into. But for our purposes, we need to make sure that we do not look like the captain here when somebody says accelerate the putter through impact. Yes, I like to take up some of the controversial stuff that's been floated out there for the world, because there are tons of catchphrases that have been accepted as conventional wisdom. This is how it works. And if you follow me on Twitter at Preston's Putting, if you can put up with a little bit of Mets baseball chat on the side, the public service announcements that show up there are definitely meant to send a message and say, maybe we should reconsider this thought or logic. And I like phrasing things in a way such as this that gets a little bit of attention, because maybe accelerating the putter isn't what creates proper speed. Maybe it doesn't give us the opportunity to get short putts to the hole and get long putts to stop near the cup. In fact, through our studio here, we've got a video of a player that is hitting a flat 10-footer and a slightly uphill 10-footer. The blue putter there is going to be the stroke for the uphill 10-footer, and the black one is for the flat putt. And played this overlay video for the player, and she said, oh, those are pretty good. They're about the same. But the real question is whether or not you actually want the same stroke for putts of identical distance, but maybe different slopes, and what our strategy is in order to achieve better results. Because as she continued to hit the putts in this set here, one comes up short, one enters with a bit more authority, one crashes into the back of the cup, another one short, and find out in her strategy to adapt to the different slope, her strategy was, well, I'm just going to make the same size backswing, I'm going to accelerate. I showed her an example of being able to prove adaptability in different circumstances. I took a player that qualified for sectionals, almost went to the US Open at Shinnecock, and showed her, you know, if we're going to have that blue putt for the slightly uphill one, maybe we want the putter to do something differently during the stroke. Maybe the result isn't hit it harder if I need to cover more distance. If I need to adapt for an uphill putt, hit it harder is probably very limited in its scope. But the number of players that have left a putt short from 10 feet and say, man, I got to hit it harder, should probably recognize that's maybe not the best possible strategy here. It's a nice thought, and it's very simple, and seems like it should be easy to incorporate something like that, when in reality, that's probably not our best approach here. You also notice in those videos that the putter is not a pendulum, and that is not how this works. It's not how any of this works. You might have seen that in the first slide that I shared with everybody about somebody that put together a graphic. And I want to go back briefly to take a look at the putter grip here as we start playing these videos. You take a look at the grip there, you're going to notice that the butt of club, or the very top of the grip, isn't staying stationary during the putting stroke. It's got some travel in both directions. Yes, does the putter look like a pendulum? Sure. And if you have a player that's never played before and they have no concept of how this moves, could you tell them, well, it looks like the bell on a grandfather clock? Yeah, maybe. I think we have better opportunities because it's not a pendulum, especially in its motion and how it's created. Ultimately, we as the golfer are going to decide how this putter moves and when it starts and stops and starts and stops again. And if we have a good understanding of that, we might not run into situations like our dear friend Jordan here has run into. I'm just going to leave this on loop here for a second or two. Oh, we got the third one. Actually, the fourth one here, because the first putt came from about 40 feet away. And let's see, should be able to play this here again. And as we look at this, might want to help players understand, okay, what can we learn from the mistake of one of arguably the best putters that's ever played on the PGA Tour here. Some good streaks, definitely finishing near the tops of the strokes gained. And one common theme as I play this video for us here again and again is that that ball has a ton of speed as it's approaching the cup. And if we could help players understand, maybe I don't need a strategy of get it to the cup. Maybe I need a strategy of proper delivery speed. Where would I want the ball to stop if the cup wasn't in the way? And how can I figure out something like that? You'll see the second putt he hits right here at the beginning is hit 3 feet by. The next one, even further by. And gonna argue that the fourth putt there had some pretty good carrying speed as we got to the front edge of the cup there before we pick up after our 4-putt and walk to the next tee with our tail between our legs. So, you know, if you've got a short putt, phrases that I hear thrown around out there are, got a short putt, take the break out of it, put it right in the center. we've even heard somebody like Tiger say that on, I believe it was the 90th hole of the 2008 US Open, just said in the press conference, yeah, didn't really know which way it was going, a little crusty on the POA, hit it firm and in the center, and trust my line. If you're Tiger, you might be able to get away with that. And in that moment, in that environment, for the day-to-day golfers, our students that come see us and asking for help, maybe we should take a little bit of time to understand how we create speed, maybe proper size of stroke, and maybe how fast or slow it moves in order to say, you don't need to crash everything into the back of the cup from 4 feet and in. I know some people that have played with me say, Preston, you look like you hit that one a little bit hard. That's okay. Yes, I've made my fair share of mistakes too, and have certainly paid for them. But if we knew for sure, say, there are a couple of key concepts that control speed here, and that size and tempo might be best levers to adjust, or at least concepts to establish for a player, we can probably start preventing 3 putts. I always tell players speed is at the center of the putting tree here, because if I had to pick between these 3 things and I can only give a player one, it's probably not going to be a bad day if my speed's okay. I can't remember the last time I had a player tell me, yep, I 3-putted from 18 feet because I missed the first putt 6 feet left. I can definitely remember times, though, where I 3-putted from 18 feet and I blew it 6 feet by and I lit the comebacker. One of those probably more prevalent than the other. Speed, let's figure out ways to establish reference points for size, tempo, and just give our players an opportunity to map out how can I do this better, practically, effectively, and measure some results here too. Lastly, we're going to get into direction, the launch of the golf ball, and a little bit more about what decided why this ball went to the left, went to the right, and maybe it's the most important part of hitting a putt, maybe it's not. Again, feedback and reference points for anyone that's been on my site, support a lot of use of the Visio products here, because it demands that the player is the one moving the putter here and being able to create that direction. Feedback for, are we starting too far left or too far right, for example. And we also should stop with some of the things about whether or not we should be going straight back and straight through or arc strokes. There is a little bit more to putting than whether or not it goes straight back and straight through. And frankly, probably one of the harder methods to employ here, but information like that is prevalent. And I've got some great footage here of one of my players who came to me and said, yeah, I'm just trying to take it straight back, straight through. And this video is captioned a look at failure in 3D for a reason, because this is an absolute failure. We're going to see as we get over this first putt here, pretty straight back for our orange line, but then you see a big loop here with that yellow line. That path starts working out to in, the cut across. You can see the face angle with the open face, the left path, and what is a flat out bad putting stroke. And that's just from the top view. So let's check out using the 3D putt software, what this looks like from down the line. All sorts of waves and wiggles, and we're talking about a player that's capable of hitting at 300 yards in the air. He can find most of his tee shots, most, not all, just most, and he has no idea what he's doing with a putter. You know, we see very little loft delivered back to the golf ball. That's just going to mean that this ball's launching low. It's probably going to bounce and skip, and we run into all sorts of issues. This player was probably broken down in more than one area. First area, obviously the ball's not going in from 4 feet. In some cases, not touching the cup from 4 or 5 feet. And when your coach is constantly in your ear telling you how bad a putter you are, that's probably not helping things. Yes, there's something to be said for trying to light a fire under somebody, but if you're going to do that, you also need to be able to give them a solution to help them find their way out of this downward spiral that they've been in. And after 18 months, I didn't think I would ever get a text from this player saying a putting would be a strength of their game. Played well, won a local city championship, and said, you know what, I feel like I've actually achieved something. I'm not entirely lost, and when I hit a wedge shot to 4 feet. And we're gonna take a look at some of these changes here, because it's important to prove that there's a concept here, and we want to be able to measure those results. We have tangible proof of improvement and can show somebody what this looked like before. That's straight back and the cut across with the open face and the rightward launching golf ball. compared to, wow, that stroke has some structure, it has some stability. And you'll notice that center line and those face lines kind of start resembling the Visio template. Maybe that's a tool that we use, but it wasn't just, hey, here's a tool, go hit some putts on this to maybe change the look. There's probably some other stuff that allowed us to change the loft. And maybe if I had a rise angle of close to 3 degrees and the effective loft of 2, we can see the ball launch, instead of it being 0.7 degrees, was 2.2 degrees. Hey, that ball's launching up in the air a little bit. It's going to start tumbling and rolling a little bit sooner versus something that's just driven along the ground, which is going to bounce and skid. Really one case that I hold close to me because he was so broken down and distraught, but it was great to see over the course of time we were able to give him that pathway to build a better structure, to utilize the Visio My Putting template, because it was a tool that provided some immediate feedback for him. He can set up his video camera looking overhead and downward at the template from the down the line view, and he can decide, say, did the center line on my putter trace that arc effectively? And if not, it wasn't just trace it back and forth and use the tool as a crutch. It was being able to create that structure and understand, say, what did I do differently with my setup, my grip, my forward bend? A lot of pieces that allowed him to create that shape, as opposed to, here's a tool, trace it back and forth. We have an example here of another player that recently came to see me, and you'll see in his follow through how the putter face twists open. You'll see in the follow through those face lines start turning red because the face is open relative to the path. And you can see that that's trying to hold it towards the target. He had a grip in this concept that I thought the face should stay square for as long as possible. That seems like it's a good idea. It's going to help me hit it straight. When in reality, that might not be our best option. He struggled with contact. He struggled with right misses. And in a static environment, in a vacuum, if we were a robot, yeah, the face staying square to the target throughout the duration of the stroke is a good idea. The only problem is we're not robots. It's not how we function. Yes, I stole that line from David Orr. Credit to him for that. He's one of my good friends and mentors. I wanted to give Logan here an opportunity to look at his putting and say, wow, that's better. Some tangible proof of improvement. We changed the grip. We changed the posture. But most importantly, we established a concept of how is this supposed to work? What is this face path relationship supposed to look like for his stroke? Not that all players would benefit from a Visio template, but if there's somebody that's entirely lost with no pattern, maybe it's not a bad pattern to build and say, at least I can get the shape of this stroke and the face path relationship a bit more functional. People always talk about the putter face being the most important part of the direction here. And while I'll say that yes, face is the key concept for direction, and it determines, depending on your source, right around 90% of the start direction of the golf ball, and path isn't a huge concern, I think the scope of what we do has been limited to where's the face at impact. And it's always about where's the face at impact. One of the graphs I like to look at on Sam Putt Lab is face rotation, and there'll be an upcoming blog post about that single moment in time, whether or not the face at impact is in fact the most important part. Maybe we should be a bit more concerned about how did we get there? What did the face do during the backswing? Was it twisting open, closed, or maybe there's something else entirely that's influencing how that putter face got back to the golf ball? Going back to shooting for the heart, not the head, our head might tell us, hey, ball's missing right, face is open, let's fix it. Make sure it's closed more. Well, again, very elementary in its approach. You got to give somebody the how. You need to make sure that they know what am I going to do to solve what caused that open face. When did it happen? Maybe they're a right aimer. Maybe they twisted open about the Z-axis during the backswing. Maybe they, in transition, the face flashes open and you get that open face to path relationship. Now for the most important part here. What's the most important skill? You look at the read and the speed and the direction. And if you have to pick one, I probably have already hinted that speed's at the center of the tree for a reason. I had one player that I asked, so what is the most important skill? And we knew all of these things. We knew about read, speed, and direction. First answer, speed. And I said, no. And then the student replied, oh, direction then for sure. And I said, no. And then, well, that leaves Reed. Reed's got to be the most important part. We've spent a ton of time on aim point. And I said, no. And then there was this bewildered frustration of, I've named the most 3 important things here about what makes the ball go in, and I'm not getting the right answer. Coach, what are you doing here? And I like to introduce the most important skill. That's the dynamic blend, because if you think about that tree, the read, speed, and direction, one isn't higher than the other on the tree. They're all equal parts here. And we're going to recognize that we have things that might appear orderly. We might have a very good looking stroke here, a Visio template model when somebody's hitting a putt and the face matches the path. It's on a perfect arc on both directions. But for some reason, they hit that on a 15-foot breaking putt and it doesn't go in. They made a great stroke, because we got to recognize that there's a lot of pieces interacting with each other. This pine branch is a good example of something that's very orderly. It's in a shape that we expect to see it. Here's what chaos for that pine branch looks like. When you start breaking it into all of its individual pieces, you say, oh, I'm going to take the branches, I'm going to group them over here in size order, and then I'm going to take the number of pine needles from each branch. I'm going to line them up to match the different branches here that I've got from my little twig here. And that's more chaotic. It's organized. And that's kind of the way we approach our practice to putting. Hey, my speed's no good. Let me go work on some speed drills. I saw this great drill on the internet. I'm going to drop balls at 20, 30, 40 feet, and I'm going to get them all to stop near the cup. I'm going to start with 20-footer, then go to 30, then go to 40, and then nothing stopping near the cup. That's probably because we haven't given the player a way to change the end result. We haven't given them the process to improve. If they don't understand size and tempo and how they're supposed to get the ball to stop near the hole, that drill in isolation doesn't do us any good. And even if we did do that well, what happens when that 30-footer's got some right to left tilt? Do they have the skill set to read the green properly in order to pick a good target based on how much tilt there is? We've got to introduce a little anarchy. We love a little bit of chaos here because that's really what's happening on the putting green. I always tell players that your putter has the highest demands and the most jobs of any club in the bag. Driver, you put a peg down on flat level teeing area in most cases, and we generally have a shot that we're going to hit. Yes, do we need to work the ball differently? Sure, high, low, little curvature. Driver's got a couple of jobs, but pretty stable environment. Putting, on the other hand, first hole, 5-footer, downhill left to right. Second hole, 15-footer, uphill right to left. Third hole, hit a par 5 and 2. We got a 45-footer across a ridge. Very different jobs, all within a short time span. Over the course of 40 minutes, this putter's seen many, many different things to do. And putter has a lot more jobs than, let's say, 7-iron, for example. We got our stock 7-iron. You might have a 3/4 7-iron, a couple of different ways to curve it or trajectories. But I'm generally not using all of those in the course of a round. I am having to tap into all of those different skill sets, this blend for putting on every single hole. I might look at a 5-foot putt that's got very little break, maybe even straight, and say, my direction skill is far more important than my speed skill. I could hit at a variety of speeds and still get the result I'm looking for. But then when we get to that second hole with that 15-footer with some break to it, I might want to start recognizing how much tilt there is. Am I going uphill or downhill so I can adjust my size and tempo properly? There is a blend of all those things that need to work together here. And it's going to be much easier for our players to figure out what's happening if we can identify what's important now. Going to give credit to a friend of mine, John Dunnigan, wrote a good putting book called Hole It, and he likes this phrase, what's important now, because when it's an acronym, it's win. What's important now? Is it my read? Do I have a 30-footer with a ton of break? And if so, I should probably figure that out. Is it my speed? Can I get it to stop near the hole properly? Or is it my direction? Do I have a short one where I absolutely need to hit it right in the center and make sure that that ball's launching in a good window here to start and stay on line during the stroke? We have a lot of battles to face as coaches. This one here, no different than any other that we would probably run into. Our students have the ability to get distracted. Let's make sure that we can keep them on the right track and not get distracted by the latest tip, the latest post. We're going to do that by making sure that we give them good information for being able to read greens. somebody sent me this and it's absolutely fantastic. I think that is a very, very nice picture, and we're on to something with laying out golf balls to help illustrate the amount of curvature of a given putt. As for plumb bobbing, take it or leave it. Somebody said it's like you're limited in your scope by new school. Plumb bobbing definitely works. I'm yet to meet somebody that can show me exactly what it does and with some sort of reliability, other than I've used it for a long time. I know what's getting ready to happen next because I might have seen this putt before. This one's fantastic here. Speed, social media, some great stuff out there. This one on Twitter. At our school, we work hard on when to be aggressive and when to diet at the hole. Most of this depends on the player's ability, but generally 8 feet and in, let it rip. 9 feet to 25 feet, be passive, and outside of 25 feet, diet all the way. Started looking at that going, okay, I disagree with a lot of stuff that's been said in this here. I know for sure that if you let it rip inside of 8 feet, you might end up like Jordan with our 3 putt, as we saw earlier. As far as being passive from 9 to 25 feet, I'm pretty sure that at 9 feet 3 inches, we're not going to go from let it rip to passive. And there's some great data out there from Scott Fawcett and Lou Stagner talking about the percentages of putts left short. And I don't quote me on this. I think the number is less than 2% of the putts on tour are left short from 10 feet. I don't think that's happening because they're passive. And if we're going to diet from 25 feet, I'm going to tell you, I don't really care if it's 3 feet short or 3 feet by from 50 feet. 3 feet is 3 feet. And if you're within 10% of the total distance at that range, probably a good rule of thumb for your amateurs, 20% margin of error, 10% plus or minus. I don't really care if you diet there. 3 feet by might be, oh, wow, that was cruising past the cup, but from 50 feet away, probably not so bad if you're measuring dispersion. Oh, and a little highlight here, that came from 2020. That was a tweet from this year. It's 2020, everybody. I know it's been a rough year. We all need to do better in certain areas, and this absolutely is one of them. And lastly, direction here. A little rough ride during our T-gate setup as we try to shift from straight back straight through to a little bit of a shape and stroke. Listen, if you can't have fun doing this whole coaching thing, then don't do it. I am so happy I had the camera running to capture that moment right there. The pure chaos, the lack of organization, and the sarcastic celebration absolutely makes something like this truly wonderful. So that said, that puts a wrap on things here for the evening. Happy to take any questions from anybody if there's some dialogue. If not, and we've got a little extra time, some bonus footage after the after credit stuff here, probably some good opportunities for some discussion for anybody that wants to jump in there. But thank you everybody for attending this evening, and I'll happily field any questions here at this point about the putting tree, the putting priorities of read, speed, and direction, and what we might be able to do to help you in your own coaching.
Great, thank you, Preston. So at this time, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and just add that in the question box. We do have one here pending for you. When looking at 3D data, what order, X, Y, or Y, is most important and why?
Looking at 3D data, X, Y, or Z, which one's most important and why? Love to know if we asked that one. That's a good question. It's going to be the blend of all of those. As far as coaching, I guess it depends upon who's the student that's standing in front of me too. Somebody that's struggling with contact, probably looking at the Z or X, hitting it off the bottom of the putter face and why that happens, hitting it off the toe or the heel, trying to figure out the out of plane movement. And knowing enough about the systems and approaches to say, what can I do differently, whether that be setup, where's the cause of the problem? Is it setup? Is it takeaway, transition? Where are they starting to get off the rails a little bit? For a lot of my players, there's heavy emphasis on good setup to make sure that we can manage where the putter's traveling in all 3 dimensions to make sure that we can create solid contact. Very interesting for me that better players are always judging whether or not the putt was solid, because there's this inherent belief that they can still get the ball to stop near the cup. And generally speaking, if we're working on solid contact, we have a lot of the other skills in place. There are some instances where the lack of solid contact comes from an imbalance of size or tempo. So a lot to unpack there. Which one am I looking at? It depends. But for most players, trying to make sure that we put things in place so that it's a good solid strike.
How does posture impact path?
Lots of ways. I think over my coaching career, it's been important to me to not get locked into a particular model or particular way to do things. Generally speaking, if you have more forward bend or a crouch position, we might see a linear pattern and much more tilting of the torso and rocking of the shoulders versus some more upright patterns that swing on a larger arc with more face rotation. I like to always convey the message to coaches that there's absolutely a playbook of how things should go, but since it's football season, if it's 3rd and 14 and they rush the extra defender, you better be able to check your option and get rid of it, or you will get sacked and end up in the ground. And that happens during putting sessions. I think this is the way something should work. We should be able to change this posture and get the stroke to change. And it doesn't do everything that it's supposed to do, which means it's time to keep looking. You need to pivot. So the playbook's there, but you also need to be able to handle stuff on the fly. So as far as posture is concerned, it depends. You got your general rule of thumb there, but probably some other things to consider too, like the relationship between the arms or what's powering the stroke.
Where can we go to find more education on Aimpoint Express?
Great information on the Aimpoint from Aimpoint on Facebook, and being able to get more education on that. Trying to get certified, you'd have to contact Mark Sweeney directly. As a level 2 certified Aimpoint coach, I can make arrangements to travel within the country, all things considered, with world climate, to be able to share that information with your client base. Tremendous opportunity. Got to figure out which direction's going and why, and it's an easy approach. It was a system built for kids ages 6 to 12, and it happens to work well enough where players all the way up to 3 number 1s in the world have said, I want to employ this technology here in order to read greens.
Speed influences read. What do you teach first, direction, read, or speed, and why?
If I'm never going to see a person again, I'd like them to leave with good speed management and being able to get the ball to stop near the cup. Nothing too bad can happen. There won't be any landmines if you stop the ball near the hole every time. Bad stuff starts happening when you leave putts excessively short, excessively long. So speed first if I'm never going to see somebody again. I think the speed and how you create the speed influences the direction. Probably not worthwhile making the first touch in a private session just green reading, because I might show them how to read a green properly, but if there's a bias built in because they're accustomed to doing a push up the hill on right to left putts because they underread it, pull up the hill on left to right putts because they underread it, and then I show them to read properly, they're probably going to putt worse. So again, that goes back to the putting priorities of read, speed, and direction sit equally on the tree, but speed, probably not a bad place to start. Good damage control everywhere.
Can you talk about the difference between the Visio mat and the old putter arc where you drag the heel against the yellow plastic?
I love that question. That's fantastic. Send me a DM on Instagram, whoever asked that one. That's a good one. The difference there for me, while similar in concept of trying to create the arc, on the Visio template, the player is responsible for moving the putter. They can create feedback by setting up a T gate of sorts to identify where it's traveling, but it's important to me to make sure that the technique and the concepts are in place with any training aid where the player decides how the putter moves. If you rest the heel of the putter up against the putting arc, I'm always curious what happens when you take it away. Does it actually translate to the golf course? It goes back to the people that just purchase a Visio template with no real frame of reference that say, yeah, when I've got the template down there, I putt it absolutely fantastic. My stroke's great. I get on the golf course and it all falls apart. There's probably something to be said for the visuals there as a reference point and to guide you, but the player's still responsible for moving it.
As far as dispersion, let's say you have a 30-footer. Is it a total dispersion of 10%, which might be 1.5 feet long or short? or is it 10% on either side of the hole? 5 feet long or short on a 50-footer would not be very good, in my opinion.
Amateur golfers need to start having easy reference points. So if they're 50 feet away and you can tell them to stop it inside of 5 feet, then they're 90% of the way there. If I gave you a science test tomorrow and said you could take 90% tonight or give it a go on your high school chem test tomorrow morning, you'd take the 90% and walk out of that one, I think. Managing dispersion and your ability to stop the ball near the cup is of paramount importance. There's a reason why tour players 3-putt more than they 1-putt starting at 33 feet. Not that they 3-putt all the time outside of 33 feet. That's certainly not the case. But as you get far enough out to 50 feet, the 3-putt percentage goes up drastically. And I think there needs to be a little bit more care for recognizing what those numbers actually are before we dictate whether or not that's good enough. Keep in mind with dispersions that the outer limits is not the average. It's an okay putt if you stop at 5 feet away from the cup from 50 feet out. Probably don't want to live at 5 feet away from my average. Maybe that average is closer to 2.5. Going back to the first part of the question, the total dispersion of 20 feet is a good rule of thumb, plus or minus 10%. So 3 feet short from 30, 3 feet long from 30, probably not the end of the world for amateur golfers. Maybe cut that number down to, on paper, 6-7% for better players, but who's doing that kind of math out there too? So it needs to be quick, easy reference points for them.
If toe flow and hosel style aren't the priorities to putter fitting, what are your top 3 that we'd love to learn about?
For putter fitting, have to get the length right. You need to make sure that the length matches the arm structure, distance from the ball, and amount of forward bend. Probably weighs your strategies to start looking at that and make sure that that's correct. Lie angle, not terribly important. I think John Graham and Eric Barzeski shared something on an Instagram story I took a screenshot of. You need to have 5 degrees of loft on the putter, 5 degrees of toe up in order for the direction of the golf ball to change like 0.25 degrees. It's negligible, and anybody that has 5 degrees of loft delivered back to the putter probably has other issues they need to start figuring out. So really not that terribly important. Let's see. Length, right? The length, head shapes kind of influence where the putters aim in some cases, and plenty of cases where it doesn't. There are plenty of instances of data that I've collected where the player hits a Newport and a Phantom, for example, and the face rotation rates are the same. To jump into some of the afterwards credits, the putter head shape doesn't dictate how I swing it. Someone's gonna have a tough time changing my mind on that because I've seen enough data where I put 2 very different putters that should do different things according to the data, and they don't, or they don't do things very differently, probably not differently enough where it makes a difference. So I think if we're going to fit, we got length, head shape kind of influences things a little bit, so we want to make sure that we're not missing anything in that department. Ball speed, you change the insert, you change how fast the ball's leaving. I'll dangle that one out there.
Great. Visual versus reality. It is said most players are left aimers. I have tested my members with a laser and found this to be true. Do you have advice on assisting alignment that looks correct, but in reality is left?
Probably going to want to figure out why that particular segment of golfers, or why that particular player on a one-to-one basis is pointing at left. Could be setup related, could be putter head related. Posture and how you position the head, neck, and eyes might have a lot to do with it. One of my favorites is tell me more about how eyes over the ball matters at setup. I think I get a lot of players that come in with that as doctrine when Paul Harian's taken some measurement from some tour data, and less than 20% of tour eyes over the ball address, but for some reason that's been considered concrete. Maybe if somebody's coming in with that concept or that information was considered doctrine in a given little hotbed, then yeah, I could see a pattern like that happening.
You might have mentioned this already, but what do you suggest or like to see as an optimal effective loft at impact for a putt?
Depends on the surface we're putting on. Good rule of thumb, more rise than loft, and making sure that if you've got a large amount of rise, like 5 or 6 degrees, that you're just not hitting it off the bottom of the putter face.
And yeah, a couple of questions here. What do you consider to be optimal launch angle? And do you like to change that for different types of greens? And can you measure that without Sand Putt Lab?
First question, yes. Measure without SAM. Could use Quintec. Really good technology there too. Certainly not going to, just because I have a SAM, not going to knock anyone else by any stretch. You could, yeah.
In the optimal launch and rise angles and your preference?
2.5 degrees for launch. Again, depends on the surface that we're putting on. Some you can get away with a little more, some a little less.
Okay, so it does change for surface for you.
Yes, but just go back to the big picture of what we've talked about here today. If I'm fiddling around with something like that, we had better be very, very good at all of the other pieces in the putting tree, and not just the first row and not just the second row, the third row and the things below the third row as it pertains to technique. So if we're messing around with that, that's probably somebody in an annual membership where I've had, you know, an extended period of time to help them facilitate changes, create ownership of given skill sets before we start looking at that in particular. Things like that sometimes end up a little too high on the priority list for some people. So pick and choose your battles. Make sure you're choosing the one that is going to yield the biggest results the soonest. Not saying it doesn't matter though.
Definitely. And this is maybe more of a statement than a question, and this will be our last one from Randy Shannon, who's admitting that he's old and he's always used Plumb Bob, and he'd like your permission to still use it as a guide.
Permission granted, but we're going to have to chat after tomorrow morning's game whether or not there might be some better ways to do it.
Well, that's all the questions. Those are some great questions by our attendees. Again, Preston, thank you so much for the time that you took to put this together and to present not only to our chapter, but to the section as a whole. We appreciate that. I know you're going to be on the road this week, and appreciate you just taking the time to do that. For everyone who has been on the webinar this evening, as a reminder, you'll earn 1 MSR credit for attending. And the recording of this presentation will be posted on the SCPGA YouTube channel so that you can rewatch and share with those that you think that might be interested. I certainly always love watching Preston present. I think putting is one of those areas that we just, as instructors, don't always spend a lot of time getting education about. We get really oohed and awed with full swing stuff. And so this was really great. Preston, thanks so much again for your time this evening. And a big thank you to section headquarters and Bryce for getting the technology and the registration set up for us. Have a great night, everybody. I wish you well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate it, everyone.